And this thing was collecting 4 or 5 or 6 gallons of water all day long from the condensation coming off of the Freon coil. So obviously, if that happens on accident, you can tweak it and fine tune it to the ultimate production of water. And if you remember, Luke Skywalker was a moisture farmer. They weren't farming food out there, they were farming water.
Investors could still see some of the strongest price action in gold this year, according to Wells Fargo, which sees signs of a developing rally. Money managers believe we could see inflation reach new levels that we have not seen since the Jimmy Carter era. For centuries, investors around the globe have turned to gold in times of economic uncertainty. Gold supplies have flipped from excessive to deficient, and such times in the past have sparked some of gold's strongest price rallies, unquote. Patriot Gold Group has the no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver, and you may be eligible for the no fee for life IRA. So go ahead and give the folks at Patriot Gold Group a call to discuss physical gold and silver.
And the knowledge that Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer 5 years in a row from 2016 until present. Click the link in the description box below for more information. And now on with the video.
So you're going to have to grow your own food. And, you know, the food, eventually what they're going to start delivering, like part of the going to the supermarket now is you can look at the tomato and say, nah, that one looks a little squishy. That one looks a little blemished. That one looks a little whatever. Everybody's got different tastes for what they like. You can choose your own food at that point, still to a point. You can walk in the supermarket and say, I don't want that one. I always like to reach the very, very back and get the one newest one because they put the oldest ones right at the front because most people just grab it and go. Or I'll take the time to actually look and find the thing that I want, the produce I want, the date I want. But when you get it delivered, you're going to have no choice. Just they're going to give you what they give you. And see, again, that puts you in another type of situation where if you have a bad credit score, are they going to give you the worst of the worst, like the one tomato that's almost half rotten that you got to eat within 6 minutes or else it's no longer good? Is that the kind of food you're going to get? Oh, there's a couple maggots running around it already. Well, good enough. You know, that kind of corptocracy where we're moving into, you know, and this whole thing, I was watching Corbett Wall. If anybody watches Feeder Flash out there, shout out. Corbett's a great guy to listen to. He is, in my opinion, the number one understanding of how auctions work for cattle and the cattle industry in general, the feed that goes into the cattle, and then the agriculture associated with the feed going in, empowering the entire cattle industry, and then on with the packers and that whole wholesale movement from the feedlot over into the wholesale market and then on into the meat packing houses. Well, he was saying, you know, the way things are going right now, there's a huge difference. The corporations are working together as a conglomerate. There's only 4. I didn't know this. He was saying apparently there's only 4 major buyers for packing houses, and they just kind of collude on prices and say, well, if you don't drop it to $117 or $114, then we're not going to take it at all. But their break-even costs were around $150. You know, the farmers right now are real stuck in a hard place. They're losing $40 per head. Losing $40 per head. So, I mean, this is a collusion at all levels here. Until what point do you say, well, you know, they're going to stop raising beef because they're losing money every head they get. Right now, there's subsidies from the U.S. government, USDA, to offset that. But what happens when they purposely stop the offset so every farmer loses money? Again, then they're going to come right back. You got the capital gain on your tax, on your land. You lost money on your cattle herd. You know, it's just going to keep moving forward like this. It is a full-on assault against everything. You're either going to have to grow your own food or you're going to have to just accept what comes at you. And, you know, beyond that, instead of saying what's acceptable, we got to start solving this problem right now so we never get put in that situation.
But the crazy thing is that it is. I mean, every time I, you know, hear the dogs barking or whatever, I look outside, it's somebody getting some food delivered by one company or another company or a company that delivers their food. And then, like I said, all of these companies are popping up now that are trying to convince people that you don't even need to go to the grocery store now. It's going to be delivered right to you, and it's better. You can't even come up with these meals yourself. No one knows how to cook or anything like that, you know. I think that literally, and I've been saying this kind of on my channel, that we have to change over like right now into a new mindset of the time that you're going to live in. We always talk about prepping, prepping food, prepping tools, prepping whatever, for protection. But think about prepping your skills, your actual real world skills. Do like I keep going back to this preservation of food. You were talking about a cool thing with berries and stuff. And I know people used to salt their meats. There's probably 1,001 ways to do this, but the fact is 99.9% of the population doesn't know how to do that. They burn their peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. They're not really sure how to cook. They're not sure how to farm. They're not sure how to fix things. And there's a whole generation of these kind of people. The only real tool I think you can have is start thinking like you're a Paleolithic human being on this planet, and start realizing the resources that are around you, the inventive resources that you can use when there are no longer box stores that you want to depend on, and no longer billionaire corporations choosing what options you have in life. And I'm sure you remember when you were a kid that when you went to Radio Shack or something like that, there were thousands and thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of parts, accessories to things that you could make things, fix things. You go to Radio Shack now, what do you see? You see billion-dollar corporations selling their tablets and phones and maybe a radio-controlled car, something like that. But what they don't sell are things you can build and invent things with anymore. We're limited to only Amazon or things like that deliver it, just like the food, right to your door. The whole concept is that people are going to have to start learning how to make things again, make tools, make machines of their own. And then you get into this problem where we've allowed our society to grow out of control, where our government tells us what we can and can't invent. I was watching one of your programs the other day about a magnetic motor, something I pictured in my head many times. And what's funny is I had never seen that design, but that's exactly what I pictured it would be like in my mind, is that exact setup to push things around. And you imagine if you had one of those, and every little chicken house, outhouse, and garage or storage shed. Imagine if you went, instead of wasting your money on a new plasma TV, you went to somewhere and you bought a bunch of solar lights, you bought some extra wire, you extend the light bulb portion and the battery into your home and put them in the house with the switch, and then it's always being charged. And if we start coming into a time where there's no sun to rely on, which is a very good possibility, especially with all the volcanic activity around the world, probably going to increase, ejecting lots of particles into the atmosphere. Well, with the solar lights thing, it's just kind of straightforward. They sell a lot of really good outside solar security lights that have the little motion sensor on them. Those things break down over time, but they do last quite a while. But think about how long they'll last when they're outside of the elements and inside of your house, the actual lighting unit. And then all you have to do is keep your solar panels clean and the connection's good. And you always have a little switch there that you can turn on when the grid goes off that will have a fully charged battery. And not only that, it'll turn itself off when you leave the room, or you could put a setting on it where, like you said, you had stored batteries that were being charged and just drain them. But the real weird concept is like, so right here in my hands, I have this big ball of these little lesser magnets, and they're stuck to the super magnet, and they're really hard to get off. I got one of these, hardcore magnets, but the whole idea that this little bit of mass of stuff here goes back to like when we were talking about stored energy, like from seeds to you to ideas. Magnets are the ultimate idea of this, concept, because this is a bunch of stored energy in here, and it's not hard to arrange these. It's kind of weird. It's like DNA. You can just have this ball of magnets that doesn't do anything sitting in the corner, being dangerous, attracting any metal thing, or you could set it up in a specific arrangement. They all come off, and you can set them up in a certain arrangement and allow the earth to move things around. And when things move around, they generate energy. So how about that? Oh God, I'm sticking everything on my table to that thing. But yeah, just the whole idea. I was looking at the design on there of one you were showing on one of your shows, and just you imagine having maybe one or two of those or even a smaller version or a larger version all over your farm and house, where you could just literally go out and pull a lever to unlock the magnetism and allow things to start moving. And it's nothing even that complicated. It's something along the same lines as those old little windmills that used to pump the water on your ranch. It's just a little bit of generation to turn something to get something accomplished. And we have so much technology right now. If people would get a little creative, you can use things that are not meant for things for other things. Like, for example, a couple years back, I installed a window unit air conditioner in my son's room, and I got the tilt of it wrong, which made it start collecting a bunch of water. And I live in a very arid environment that's in the desert, and this thing was collecting 4, 5, or 6 gallons of water all day long from the condensation coming off of the Freon coil. So obviously, if that happens on accident, you can tweak it and fine tune it to the ultimate production of water. And if you remember, Luke Skywalker was a moisture farmer. They weren't farming food out there, they were farming water. So if you live, I've even thought about other things, like maybe something if you live in the desert, that if you've ever seen those pull down screens, you could set up a thing like that you expand when the wind is low, and collect a bunch of free water from dew in the morning that will pour right into your gardens. I mean, there's just on and on things like this. I'm sure your house, not your house specifically, but some of you have a leaky toilet or a leaky thing. Some of these things, you wouldn't imagine how much water you're wasting. And if you took that water and repurposed it, you could have so much extra stuff. We live in a land of abundance, and people just don't understand how the Legos go together. But once you did, like you said, you could just imagine that if I had a small motor over here running my computer, when we reach the point of human beings where we don't need to give in order to use energy, in other words, we don't need other people to produce energy of any kind, whether it's energy for our bodies through food, spiritual energy from studying and meditating, or even actual energy out of the technology we have. We can store the energy. Storing energy and deciding when to release it. It's like a universal law. And if we could incorporate that into our lives, that every human being should be on the same ideal, but in your real life, storing energy of all kinds.
Yeah, you mentioned the water motors there. Something called gravitational vortex power, GVP. Now, this is an idea for a neighborhood or a few homes together that have a stream near you, or you have an aquifer that's pouring out of a mountain that can be redirected into a tub or a channel that can then hold the water and release it at a certain rate. So, for example, let's say you have a aquifer on your property that's coming out at 20 gallons a minute, but you would build your holding tank so it would release at, say, 15 gallons a minute or 17 gallons a minute. So it would always remain full and you'd have an overflow on that. But then that 15 gallons per minute rate would be the thing that you would tune your generator to. So the flow rate going through your generator would be tuned for a little bit less than your outflow is, but you'd have holding tanks so it's continuously full, continuously running, continuously pushing that water downhill. So one of the main things that I'm also so surprised with governments around the world not utilizing magnets in the Earth's magnetic field for free, because you got to think it's just a one-time installation cost. There's no utility bills after you install it. See, then they lose power because there's no tax base and there's no more government control, and your life costs drastically reduce. But it's really shocking for me in all these areas across the planet. Now, GVP and gravitational vortex power will not work in an enormous amount of places on the planet, but at the same time, it will work in an enormous amount of places on the planet that have continuous water flow from a stream. Now, generally, you're going to need 1 cubic meter per second flowing through, but if you get the calculations right, just scale that down to fit your water output needs. I was looking at this stuff over in Germany, and there's this company called Zotlotterer. It's Zotlotterer. And he was working on Schauberger's vortex power principles. And this company, Zotlotterer, out of the patents from the 1930s created something in our modern day. It's basically using a piece of concrete piping that you would see that, the utilities on the side of the road. Sometimes you see that when they're installing bigger sewer pipes. And they cut an inlet into it, and they just let the water spin in a circle like you would when your bathtub at the very, when you pull the plug out and the water gets kind of low and then it starts making that vortex in there. Well, you can replicate that same vortex, but you can scale it up bigger. And then all you do is put a rotor in the center there, and then that spins. And that's what then you can attach to an alternator. I've seen some real simple stuff. I saw some things in Nepal where they had used just a bicycle wheel, and they'd created their own curved blades on that, and then they actually put an automobile alternator on that, so that continually charged the battery, which would get back to that. Again, the marine batteries, car batteries, some kind of battery to charge. And they were finding that since it was continuously flowing, they were able to overflow the charge into several batteries. And then people would come down from the hills and recharge their rechargeable lights, and then they would get batteries and take it back higher in the Himalayas. So it was like a recharge spot. But it only worked part of the year because they were only going on natural flow off the melt. So they got about 4 months of electricity off that. It's so surprising that all these inventions and ideas are out here to give us free power. And when I say that, I literally mean free. After the installation costs, you don't have to burn anything. So everybody's yapping about CO2 and yipping on about pollution. I'm not a fan of the particulates. I'm really not. I mean, there's so much pollution around. I'm really just so disillusioned with how much pollution's in the atmosphere and plastics in the oceans. And okay, I get it. I understand that. But a natural gas burning power plant should not be demonized. Yeah, it puts out CO2, but who cares? CO2 is plant food. So all these purists out there saying, oh, CO2 is bad. Okay, well, you want to limit the CO2? Great. Why are we not using magnetic motors, and why are we not using gravitational vortex power? If you all are on your bandwagon the whole time about reducing CO2, we got two perfect options here that provide free power for everybody and reduce CO2 to zero. But nobody wants to talk about that. I just don't get it, Ransom. I just don't get it. I really don't. The solutions are there, but nobody wants to do it.
I think they'll let us use it in like 2060 or something like that, when they really need more workers all of a sudden, because there's not very many people and all their AI and are breaking down and their servants are tired when they crawl back out of their holes. No, I'm just kidding about that, but it might be that way. I think the reason that they're doing that is because they just haven't figured out how to control it and manipulate it into a way that we would have to buy it and depend on it. Because like you said, it doesn't produce harmful chemicals. It doesn't produce radiation. It doesn't mess with the environment. The only thing that it could possibly do is, create electromagnetic fields, possibly. Anybody knows that around magnets, it's not really dangerous, but it's almost like the force, kind of. It's energy that we don't even have to do. And magnets are so fascinating because we know that the entire universe is an electromagnetic universe, and everything runs off that. That should have been common sense to start there. You would think that that's where our technology should have started in the first place once we discovered magnetite.